Hi, my name is Carolyn Floyd, and I am the Senior Director of the Office of Experiential Learning and Immersion Vanderbilt. And I am so glad that you are joining to see this webinar today about experiential learning at the Vanderbilt University and about how it is part of the Immersion Vanderbilt undergraduate degree requirement. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and dive into my slideshow, and then we will be keeping track on chat for any questions. I'll probably save most questions until the very end. So hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered as I go through the presentation. So what is experiential learning? What is Immersion Vanderbilt? And why are these important? And so important that they have become a part of the undergraduate requirement to have a Vanderbilt degree. So experiential learning is what's called a high impact practice. And it's a way that students can apply what they're learning in the classroom into a real world setting. And I think that's not anything new to us. If we think about the historic things that everybody thinks about doing when they go to college, like you'll get an internship so you can get a great job, or you'll go on a study abroad so that you can learn a new language or immerse yourself in a culture. Those are all really great skills that students learn only by getting outside of a classroom setting and into a real world experience. And so experiential learning is tied to the curriculum at the university because we want our students to be able to take that great knowledge that they're learning from our world-class faculty and apply it to their overall learning. There are three high impact practices that are part of Immersion Vanderbilt. One of those is experiential learning. The other is a culminating project. And then over all of that is a mentored relationship. Students will have an opportunity to be mentored by a faculty member or a staff member during their experience. And then when they are ready to tie it all together and show what they learned through the formation and completion of a final culminating project, they'll be mentored by an Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor. So every student will graduate having had a wonderful mentored experience and a close relationship with a faculty person who has advised through the completion of a final project that demonstrates what they learned. In the end, the students get to title their Immersion Vanderbilt project, and that will go on their transcript, can be used on their resume, and they can use it for anything that they want to do after they graduate. So we encourage them when we do advising about Immersion at Vanderbilt to think about what they want this to do to help them get into grad school or medical school, or maybe they're going straight into work. What is that first great job that they're going to have, and how can this help them get there? So we track along through the different milestones to show to have students follow through a process. So it makes sense to them, and so that we know what they are doing, because that's really important. Immersion Vanderbilt isn't tied to their majors. It's not tied to their minors. They can certainly use the requirements of certain majors and minors to also satisfy Immersion Vanderbilt's requirements, but immersion can be something that's completely outside of their curriculum. So we came up with a 4-milestone process so that we know what students are doing. So we decided to start with milestone 1. Pretty simple. It's just tell us what you're going to do. It's called an immersive experience declaration form. Students submit this form in the spring semester of their sophomore year. So that's coming up. April 7th is a deadline. If you're the parent of a sophomore student, then they have an April 7th deadline. If you're a parent of a senior or a junior, then they already had this deadline and we made sure that they met it. And if you're a parent of a first-year student, they can submit their IEDF even before this time. This is just the deadline to give us one example. And you might hear your students talk about this and they might be a little concerned about making this deadline, but there's really no pressure. The immersive experience is anything that might satisfy the learning outcomes. So something like an internship, even some sort of summer work, if they are volunteering at a camp, really kind of anything they're doing over the summer could probably be immersive. They'll be learning from it. We just want to know what they're doing. Our form will walk them through the steps to tell us like who's mentoring them, and we can help mentor if they don't have somebody else. Where are they going to be located? Who are they doing this experience with? And finally, they do some self-reflection that kind of level sets. And those reflections are based on the 5 learning goals of Immersion Vanderbilt that were carefully crafted by several of our faculty members and our Immersion Vanderbilt Faculty Steering Committee. After students complete their experience, then they can submit their second milestone, and this will help get them to where they need to go on their degree audit. So this will be the second thing that checks off their 4-step progress toward completing the requirement. So students can submit this self-reflection towards the end or after they've completed their experience, and both of these 1 and 2 forms are simply the product of the student's work. My office reviews them so that we're sure that students are responsive to the prompts and that we understand what their experience is that they were doing. But otherwise, it is entirely the student's work. When they are ready, they can either go on to the 3rd milestone or they can submit another experience. There is an unlimited amount of subsequent experiences that students can submit. If they think that they want to use an experience for their Immersion Vanderbilt final culminating project, then they have to submit an experience form for it. So that can look like a student who is doing the Vanderbilt Undergraduate Summer Research Program this summer, and then they could submit a subsequent experience form for a study abroad that they might do next spring. And then they can decide which one of those 2, or maybe it's both of them together, that will be the basis for that final project that they create with their faculty advisor. But let's say that they're finished with experiences and they're ready to move on, then milestone 3 is where they can declare what their final culminating project is actually going to be, when they're going to finish it, and who they're working with toward that completion. This is where their faculty person will officially be named if they're not already their mentor for their experience. And this is where the students are going to really tell us how they're tying it all together. Through this process, the students will learn a lot about what they experienced and how it impacted them. They'll be able to see more of their growth through the self-reflection and just the creation of this project. And the 4th milestone, this is where it's all tied together. They name it and they put it on their transcript. Their faculty advisor will mark it as complete, and then they are finished. So students can have multiple experiences, but they can only have 1 final culminating project. So once it's done, it's done. They can go on and complete projects in other ways, but Immersion Vanderbilt is just a one-time completion. So the timeline for this, just to review that a little bit, there's a mandatory tell us what you're doing experience declaration in the spring of the sophomore year. And then after that, they have to submit their final culminating project by the time they're getting to their last semester on campus. So we ask them not to wait until the very end of the semester in case there are edits that are needed, and they should work with their Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor to make sure they are on time, that they know when drafts are due or what they're doing. Some of this might be built into their curriculum. So if you've got, say, like a student in engineering, they're doing the senior design project probably, they're on track to complete that as long as they're completing the requirements for their major. HOD is the same way. There are several majors and minors that have Immersion Vanderbilt culminating projects built into them. And we've recently added courses that are tagged also. So if a student enrolls on a course that's tagged as either experiential or culminating, or maybe even both, then they will get what they need through the completion of that course to satisfy their Immersion Vanderbilt requirement. So a lot of questions are about, like, what does something look like? And it's really funny I would say that because the picture didn't show up for this slide of what Emma Hart's project looked like. But Emma Hart worked on research on improvements to early childhood intervention to optimize development for children. So this was a research experience that took Emma off campus. One of the things that you'll discover when you're talking to your students is that they'll mix a whole lot of different types of experiences, something like research and study abroad, and then they can create their final culminating project out of that. Other research might look like Janet Mariados's research, which is exploring the history of race and truth in science, and she created something very creative out of that project. So you could see a student doing something that's very artistic out of what they might have done for research. Other students, like Janet Stefanov, did National Science Foundation research experience, and she was working in economics. And the fun thing for us in our office is that we know these students. I've advised these students. I met Janet as a first year student. She is now a graduate of Vanderbilt University. And I got to see her trajectory through the entire process. And Janet did a couple of different experiences, and this is the one that she landed on. And it was really great to go through that process with her. So just in case you're wondering, we advise students through the whole process. And if they change their mind, then my office is there to help them with that. They're not going through this alone. If they have questions to you, then please tell them to come and talk with us, because we can help them navigate through multiple experiences and several different decision points. One of our student workers, Asia, was working on microbiome research. And so she was working on the effects of the microbiome to wasps. But she did several different projects. So this is the one that she chose to highlight. And we've got some lab research over here with Alyssa Bolster, who's working on 1,000-year-old human skeletons. So that was actually an anthropology research project that resulted in the creation of a final culminating project. Study abroad is also an immersive experience. And so we're pretty happy to say that now that the pandemic is subsiding enough, we are able to go study abroad again. For a year or two. We didn't have any stories to tell about what students were doing. Thankfully, last summer, Thomas was able to go to Italy and work on a language immersion as an au pair. And this past fall, Dina went to Japan and she worked on something with community engagement, but she's not quite done yet. So we're still advising her through that process. What do the projects look like? They can take any form. So think about multiple outcomes. We've already seen research with an artistic outcome. Students did a museum exhibit, a replica of a dress from one of the most famous films ever made, creating a debut jazz album and recording. We have several students who are in different steps of the process along the way, and we are really excited to see the work that they're producing. Towards the end of this semester, we are actually going to demonstrate a lot of what they've done through several showcase events. So we've got an undergraduate summer research fair on April 11th. We have an arts showcase and writing symposium on April 13th. And then the following week, we're doing a more general Immersion Vanderbilt showcase that will track lots of different types of experiences. If you have questions that we don't get to answer, and I'll look at the chat in just a second, then you can reach out directly either to the office for general questions, to Assistant Provost Amy Johnson, who oversees the office along with me. And you're always welcome to contact me with any sort of questions. So I'm going to open up the Q&A and chat now. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen also. Okay, and let's see what we've got here. So if my student is interested in doing medical research, how do they go about finding projects? Great question. A lot of students are doing research all around campus all the time. And we do several showcase events. So we've got the undergraduate research fair that students present at, but then also they can attend and they can see what kind of research other undergraduates are doing. And they can also decide if they want to reach out to a faculty person who's already engaged in undergraduate research. But yesterday we just had an event that is intended to get students connected to faculty doing research from all across campus. And so we had about 60 students come and meet with about 20 different presenters who talked about their research and were open to working with students. So there's a lot of different methods that students can follow. They can always send an email, but we recommend that they send a targeted email to somebody whose interest really is in line with their own interests. We also can help connect students. If someone's having a difficult time, we have mechanisms in our office for connecting students with research faculty and then also with faculty to help with their final culminating projects. Those are among the things that we talk about when we have advising sessions with students. So while advising isn't required with our office, I highly recommend it. And we ask for your help in getting students to reach out to us either via email or to make an advising appointment through our portal and come and see us. And they can visit us as often as they want. We also have emails going back and forth with them. So we can most certainly help with helping them connect with the student. Another question I see, are students assessed in their work for Immersion Vanderbilt? So there is an assessment, and it is done by their Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor. So for something that's tied to the curriculum, satisfactorily completing the degree requirements or the course requirements will also satisfy that step toward their Immersion Vanderbilt completion. If it's something that the student has done completely independent outside of a coursework setting, then they should have already set up the expectations with their Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor. There will be no secrets and no surprises because together the faculty and the student have decided what the completion of the final project will be. And like I said before, they shouldn't delay in deciding on when they'll submit, say, a first draft or have a conversation about the progress that they're making. And so they are assessed. They will determine with the faculty member what success looks like in advance, and then they have multiple opportunities to submit their project if they need to go back and revise it. There's a question about funding that exists for students. So I'm happy to say that we do have funding for different types of experiences. Some of it is housed in the Office of Experiential Learning and Immersion Vanderbilt. So we actually are right now in the process of doing a couple of different awards. We've got the Nichols Humanitarian Fund that is under review right now, and so is the Vanderbilt Undergraduate Summer Research Program. We also just finished the Global Summer Fellows. But outside of those areas, there are different offices that are running different funding for things like summer research in data science or summer research over in the School of Medicine. We've got different funding streams that are coming in all the time. And so we've got a few different general funds that are also available. So students can visit our website, immersion.vanderbilt.edu, and go to the funding tab to see all of the different funding sources that are available and to read about when those application processes are open. And again, if they have questions, if some of it isn't clear, or if they're not sure if they meet the requirements, then they can always reach out to us via email or for an advising session. I see a question about multiple experiences, and yes, so students are encouraged to submit multiple experiences if they are doing them. And I want to be really clear that immersive experiences don't necessarily fall out of what students are already doing. So like I said in the very beginning, a lot of students come to Vanderbilt or to any college and they're thinking, I'm going to do an internship. Well, that can be an immersive experience. So it's something that they were already planning to do that can satisfy this requirement. The requirement isn't over and above on top of everything else. It's actually woven into the things students are already doing. The final culminating project might be something that they would not have already conceptualized, but it doesn't require them to do anything magnanimous and huge. It can be a paper, it can be a presentation at one of our showcase events, it can be something private that their faculty and they decide that they're just going to simply submit to them for review, something like a portfolio. It could be kind of whatever they want it to be, but we just encourage students to pick something that will help propel them into their next steps after they leave Vanderbilt University. I'm reading the chat and I'm trying to pick up where I left off. Here I see the H2 capstone can help satisfy the requirement. So yes, I see some questions about that. If students are completing the requirements for human and organizational development capstone, then they are satisfying the requirements for Immersion Vanderbilt. They still must submit those 4 milestone forms because simply completing the HOD requirements or any other major or minor requirements won't satisfy right on its own. You have to say, this is what I'm doing for my Immersion Vanderbilt, and this is what I'm doing for my final culminating project. That still has to be communicated separately, but it's not a lot of extra work, and it's nothing extra as far as the project goes. And if your student is unclear, please send them to us for advising. We're more than happy to talk to every student. I see a question about the tagged classes. So when students go into their enrollment system, which is called YES, they will see that there are course attributes for different classes. And some newly added attributes include experiential and culminating project. And they can filter using the search functions in YES to find classes that will satisfy those things. I also want to say that it doesn't mean that other classes that aren't tagged could not satisfy some of those, but the faculty, for whatever reason, didn't tag those classes. And so the student might want to talk to the faculty member about being their mentor or being their advisor if the faculty member didn't already put it out there in the front that they would do it by tagging the class. And I see a question about past experiences. So can my student name an experience that they already completed? We do usually require students to submit their immersive experience forms before they've done something, or maybe kind of like after they start, it occurs to them that this is a thing that they should be submitting the IDF for. But we also are willing to work with students. So if there's a question about this, if a student is unsure if they should go ahead and add it, then send them to us. We really love the human aspect of what we do in our office and helping students realize the full potential of their experiential learning. And so through that, we'll work with students and figure out what we need to do to make sure that they are completing something that is really meaningful to them. Next question I see is, for students planning double major and at least one minor, how many Immersion Vanderbilt projects do they need to do? And then the second question on that is, what is the scope and time and outcome for one project? Okay, so the first question, no matter how many minors or how many majors a student has, they only do one Immersion Vanderbilt project. There can be multiple experiences, but in the end, they decide on one final culminating project. It'll have one title, one immersive experience unit listed on their transcript, and that is it. So they won't be required to do multiple experiences if they have multiple majors. The scope and time and outcome for one project depends on what the student chooses to do for their Immersion Vanderbilt project. And I think that's really critical for me to repeat. Students choose what will be their Immersion Vanderbilt final culminating project, whether they want to choose something that is in their major. So they want to use their art major, which they're doing this wonderful art showcase at the end of the spring semester. If they want that to be their Immersion Vanderbilt, then that's great. And they can do that. But if that same student did a really wonderful study abroad in Florence and they want that to be their Immersion Vanderbilt, then they can do that too. So there's no requirement that they use their major if it will satisfy Immersion Vanderbilt. And there's also no requirement that they have to pick something specific. They can really choose the thing that they want to do. And it can be a mix of different things. It could be an opportunity for them to try something extra that they wouldn't have normally done. It's really up to the students. We've got different schedules, different requirements for their time, and that's all taken into consideration. So again, send them to us for advising. We can talk about their plans. We can help them think it through. And if something just doesn't work out after they've tried it, then we can also help them pivot and come up with a really successful final culminating project also. The next question I see is, what is the timeline for students as they complete final projects after their experience? That again kind of depends on what they chose to do and then how much time they have before they want to finish their final culminating project. So if it's part of their major, then that's just tied into the normal progress of their major or their minor. If it's something that the student created, they might be okay taking their time and waiting until they are ready to graduate to submit their final culminating project. Other students might want to go ahead and finish it up. We have some students who are ready to be done in their sophomore year. And while we don't encourage rushing through because there's not really a strong reason for that in most cases, it's kind of nice to have it finished if that's what they know they want to do. So there's also not a reason for them to delay until their last semester. Unless it's tied to their major or minor requirements, the timeline is really up to the student and their Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor. The next question I see, if my student is conducting research right now with a faculty member, can they submit this as part of their experience for Immersion Vanderbilt? Yes, they can. And I'm glad that you asked that. If they are doing it right now and you know that they haven't submitted or you think they haven't submitted it, then please call them tonight and tell them to submit that immersive experience declaration form for their research or their internship. If they're going on a Maymester, that would be great. There are so many opportunities for these experiences, and submitting it doesn't obligate them to make a final project out of it. So there's really no reason not to submit it. They can tell us that they're going to do it, and they can decide later that that is what they want to use for their project, or that it's not what they want to use for their final culminating project. And they could also like put research on top of research. So they do something this semester, and then they move maybe over to a different lab or a different project in the same lab. They can keep going and do one big final project if it's tied together enough. Okay, next question. My son is currently a freshman. He applied for a National Science Foundation REU in New Mexico for the summer. If he's awarded, should he submit that experience before April 7th? I think he should. Absolutely. And I wish him the best of luck. That sounds fantastic. And he should definitely submit that before April 7th. And again, if something changes, so if he submits that, say he submits it because he wants to make the deadline and he still hasn't heard back and it needs to change, then he can change it and we will work with him on that. We love our students. We love how dynamic everything they do is, and we're here to help this be flexible and fun and engaging. This should be the thing that they get really excited about when they talk about what they're doing at Vanderbilt. So it can be tied to their major or something completely separate, but we don't want them to feel like they're stuck in anything. So if it didn't work out, then just let us know. The next question, are faculty advisors assigned or do the students choose? The Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor is only assigned if the student has either chosen to use their major or minor degree requirements, or if they've chosen a class that was tagged for a final culminating project. Otherwise, the Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor is not assigned, and they can invite somebody to work with them on it. And if they're having any trouble with that, my office is equipped to help them find someone. Can shadowing count as an immersive experience? So typically shadowing in and of itself is not considered immersive enough. However, I will say that students generally don't just leave it at that. So if a student came to me and asked me this, I'd actually want to talk to them a little bit more about what they're planning to do with that shadowing, and then maybe go into a little bit more advising and help figure out what they really want to create out of that in the end. So if your student is thinking about shadowing, then please send them to us. I also highly recommend they talk to the Health Professions Advisory Office about what they're planning to do if they are thinking about going into any kind of health advisory, health sort of program, med school, dental school, vet school, any of those. They should talk to HPAO. So please explain the difference between the experienced mentor and the faculty advisor. Is this faculty the same as their academic advisor? Such a great question. Okay, so Immersion Vanderbilt is two things. It's an experience and it's a final culminating project. And remember, it's mentored through both of those. The experience can be mentored by a Vanderbilt staff member unless it's undergraduate research, and then it has to have a faculty person. So while it can be mentored by a staff member, they can all be mentored by faculty if they want, but undergraduate research always has to be mentored by a faculty person. Then when they're ready to do their final culminating project, students will work with an Immersion Vanderbilt faculty advisor for that. And the reason I use that really long forward term is to distinguish it from the academic advisor. Typically, it's not the same person. I don't know very many students who do work with their academic advisor for their final culminating projects, but there's no rule against it. It's just not generally how it works out. Okay. The forms. Oh, great. Where can students access forms? Students can go to the Immersion Vanderbilt website and click on the link for the Immersion portal, and all of the forms are in there. The forms are only available as the students progress through. So the first immersive experience declaration form, that first milestone is available if your student hasn't done anything yet. And then the self-reflection becomes available after that is approved. And then once the self-reflection is approved, then the third form is available and so on. So they become available so the students go through them in the order that they're supposed to. Other questions that I see. More examples about final culminating projects. It's my favorite part. I love this part. And I think that might be the end of our questions for right now. So I'm going to end on this part. So some of the final culminating projects are absolutely amazing. We have a student who is actually doing a recital tomorrow, I believe. She wrote songs based on photographs of her father, who is no longer with us. And this was her project. She's written, I think, 10 songs, and she's doing a recital in them tomorrow night. And that is absolutely touching and wonderful. And they are going to be great songs. So there's something like that is just very intimate and personal. Students also are doing all kinds of research on campus. And I love to walk through the research fair and see their posters. They can also do digital presentations. We've had students who have created different art pieces, and they will do a demonstration about the art and talk about what it means to them. So the final projects are oftentimes very much tied to the personal story of the student. I am advising a few students now who are thinking about creating web pages, and the students don't know each other, but one of them told me about a web page that is an homage to women that we love. And so a few students that I've talked to are doing their projects, and then they're creating the web page about how those projects are tied to women and their families. So these are turning out to be really cool, really personal, and highly independent projects by students. I hope that after you've heard this presentation, you're excited about Immersion Vanderbilt for your student, and that you have a little bit more clarity about the requirement. But please reach out to my office if there are any questions that you have. And next week, the Global Education Office is going to be talking about the study abroad program in more detail. So if you want more information about that, then join them on March 1st. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.